I'm going to say something right now that most channels on this platform simply won't touch. The Indiana Fever front office isn't just making random mistakes. What they've been doing over the past week is starting to raise serious questions, because when you line up every decision side by side, it doesn't look scattered, it doesn't look accidental, it looks coordinated, and it's pointing in a direction fans are now beginning to notice. A direction that feels like it's slowly stripping Caitlin Clark of the very identity that makes her Caitlin Clark. This isn't what real incompetence looks like. Incompetence is messy, it's inconsistent, it's drafting the wrong player, missing on a trade, or botching a cap decision. What's happening in Indiana feels different. It's sequential, it's structured, it's layered, and when you zoom out and connect the dots, it starts to resemble a pattern, almost like a blueprint forming in real time. A blueprint that takes the most dangerous offensive force women's basketball has ever seen, and gradually reshapes her into something far less central in her own system. This is WNBA analysis at its rawest. No filters, no corporate polish, just the reality fans are debating everywhere, because what we're about to break down is not just a bad stretch. It may be one of the most confusing, self-undermining weeks the Indiana Fever organization has had in recent memory. We're going to trace the timeline piece by piece. We're going to look at the structural decisions, the tactical shifts in the offense, and the bigger picture behind it all. And yes, we're also going to address the growing belief among fans that ego and internal decision making are starting to collide with what actually works on the court. Stay locked in, because once you see the full picture laid out, it changes how you look at everything that's been happening in Indiana.
The WNBA becomes more of a clown show. Seriously. They got handed a golden goose in Caitlin Clark that literally has been turned into a new CBA where they're all actually earning a little scratch. You got players out there running their mouths about fans over their money. You've got a front office in the Indiana Fever's front office that seems completely clueless right now. You're drafting in a player that just drowned the fan base.
Let's break the timeline down clearly, step by step, day by day. Free agency opens. The Indiana Fever enter the offseason with full salary cap flexibility. The slate is completely clean. Only a small core is locked in. Caitlin Clark, Aaliyah Boston, and Michaela Timpson. That means they had full control to build anything they wanted around a franchise-defining guard and a dominant young big. They could have gone in any direction. Add size next to Boston. Add elite wing shooting to maximize Clark's spacing, build length, defense, or versatility. Whatever blueprint you believe in, the options were wide open. So what's the very first move they make? They signed Tasha Harris, a point guard, not a stretch big, not a defensive anchor, not a floor spacing wing, a point guard, the exact position Caitlin Clark plays, the exact role she is already built around, the same position where she is widely regarded as the centerpiece of the offense. So instead of complimenting their franchise player, the first move they make introduces direct overlap at her most important position. That's not a small detail, that's a direction. Days 2 through 5 arrive, and things settle into a more familiar rhythm. Kelsey Mitchell returns, Lexi Hull is brought back, Sophie Cunningham joins. A few steady, understandable moves that keep the structure intact, nothing controversial, nothing alarming on the surface. For a moment, it feels like things might be stabilizing. The roster still has continuity, the spacing still makes sense. Some fans start to relax, thinking maybe the earlier move was just depth insurance or a rotation experiment rather than a signal of something bigger. Then comes draft night. The Fever hold the 10th overall pick. Expectations are clear across the fan base. Add size, add physicality, add a forward who can help balance the backcourt heavy structure, and unlock even more space for Caitlin Clark and Aaliyah Boston. Instead, Commissioner Kathy Engelbert announces Raven Johnson, another point guard. That makes 3-point guards added in a single off-season build, but this selection carries more weight than just position stacking. Raven Johnson isn't just another guard in the pool. She's one of the most publicly discussed defensive matchups connected to Caitlin Clark's college run, the player involved in one of the most viral moments in NCAA tournament history, tied to Clark in a game that sparked massive online debate and long-lasting narrative pressure. And that's what makes the decision land differently for fans watching closely, because with dozens of forwards, guards, rim protectors, and roster fit pieces still on the board, Indiana didn't just double down on guard depth again. They selected a player whose history is already emotionally and publicly intertwined with their franchise centerpiece. And now, instead of building outward around Caitlin Clark's strengths, the pattern many fans are starting to question is whether the roster construction is unintentionally stacking narratives, positions, and pressure points right around her.
That's what you have going on right here with Lynn Dunn. I love this. The 4 types of complainers. And it's got all these corporate jargon, bullshit definitions that somebody put snipped out of some article somewhere. And she posted this on her social media. It's a clear shot at the Indiana Fever fan base. Talks about the productive complainer, the venting complainer, the chronic complainer, the malicious complainer. This person needs to be removed. They complain about it.
If you think the draft pick was the explosive moment, you're missing the bigger picture entirely, because the real shock wasn't the selection itself. It was what came immediately after, and almost nobody in mainstream sports media is breaking down what unfolded over the next 48 hours. Let's lay it out clearly. Stephanie White walks up to the podium. She's asked directly about the guard situation and the rotation. What she says next ends up reshaping how people are interpreting the direction of this franchise. First, she refers to rookie Raven Johnson as a true point guard. Second, she describes Caitlin Clark as someone who can play both on and off the ball. Third, she suggests that the surplus of guards will actually help reduce the workload on Kelsey Mitchell. Notice what's missing. At no point does she firmly establish Caitlin Clark as the unquestioned lead guard. At no point does she explicitly state that the offense is built around her as the primary initiator. Instead, she frames her franchise centerpiece as a flexible piece in a broader system, while elevating a rookie guard into the label of true point guard, all with the entire basketball world listening. Now pause there, because this is where modern basketball logic matters. The idea of a rigid true point guard in today's game doesn't really hold up the way it used to. In a system built around a heliocentric star, think Luka Doncic, LeBron James, or Caitlin Clark, the offense naturally flows through that player. They are the engine. Clark averaged elite assist numbers, she controlled games at the highest level, and she already proved she can run a team at championship tempo on the international stage. So when you introduce a non-shooting ball-handling guard into that same structure and reduce Clark's on-ball responsibility, the spacing consequences become immediate. Defenders can cheat off that player, they can collapse into the paint, and suddenly, the pressure on Aaliyah Boston increases dramatically with tighter windows and heavier coverage. What looks like a rotation adjustment on paper can quietly reshape the entire geometry of the offense. But that wasn't even the end of the conversation. The next day, the president of basketball operations, Kelly Krauskopf, goes on local radio and starts addressing free agency and roster construction. She talks about the challenge of fitting everything together. But that wasn't even the end of the conversation. The next day, the president of basketball operations, Kelly Krauskopf, goes on local radio and starts addressing free agency and roster construction. She talks about the challenge of fitting everything together, and then she says something that sticks out immediately. Caitlin Clark will need to adjust to the new pieces. That word matters. Adjust. Not the rookies, not the new additions, not the system. The player who just carried historic expectations, generated massive attention for the league, and became one of its biggest commercial forces is the one being told to adapt. And that framing raises questions about hierarchy, about usage, and about where the center of gravity for this team actually sits. Then, just as the conversation starts to settle, another voice enters, and the implications only deepen from there. Clip.
I'm telling you, I got sent this by Evelyn DR right here. She sent me this on Monday before the draft. Raven Johnson signed a multi-year deal with Adidas. Right here. For them shoes. Yikes. Talk about clown show shoes. Anyway, for those shoes. There is not a world where you will convince me that
The 78-year-old legend, the championship-winning coach, the same figure Caitlin Clark herself once called the GOAT on Instagram. And yet, when a wave of fans, backed by basic basketball analysis, started raising concerns about the direction of the franchise, her response wasn't engagement or clarification, it was dismissal. She goes on social media and posts what reads like a corporate statement, framing concerned fans as nothing more than toxic voices who spread negativity and damage team chemistry. She brushes them off in a way that, to many observers, mirrored the same kind of wave-off energy Caitlin Clark gave Raven Johnson back in 2023. The irony wasn't subtle, it felt deliberate, and for a growing section of the fan base, it didn't just sting, it alienated. Then came another layer, WNBA veteran. Erica Wheeler enters the conversation, and instead of calming things down, she escalates it. She takes aim at critics by mocking their financial situation, suggesting that anyone questioning the team is simply bitter because they don't earn six figures. At that point, you have multiple voices across different levels of the organization and locker room culture, all feeding into the same outcome: frustration on one side and widening distance on the other. Coach, front office, senior advisor, veteran player, and across all of them, not a single unified message ever gets delivered. The one line that could have grounded everything instantly: that Caitlin Clark is the point guard and the offense is built through her. That absence speaks louder than anything that was actually said. And that's where the deeper issue starts to take shape, because what's becoming clear is that the Indiana Fever are not purely constructing a team around Caitlin Clark as a singular offensive engine. Instead, they appear to be building around Stephanie White's system first, and that distinction changes everything. White's system is structured, physical, and defensively driven. It thrives on switching, shared ball handling, and constant pressure across the floor. It is designed around interchangeable roles and collective responsibility, not one dominant initiator. That approach worked in Connecticut with a very different roster profile and a very different style of primary creators. But Caitlin Clark is not a system piece in the traditional sense. Yet she is a heliocentric offensive force, the kind of player who warps defenses simply by controlling the ball. Every possession flows through her. Every advantage starts with her decision making. She doesn't fit into a shared hierarchy, she defines it. Trying to shift her into a committee-style structure is like taking a Formula One car and asking it to function as a delivery van in city traffic. It still moves, but you've completely ignored what makes it special, and that's the tension sitting underneath everything right now. A generational offensive engine being placed inside a framework that doesn't naturally align with how she dominates the game.
Oh my God, Raven Johnson was available and we just couldn't pass up such a talent. Well, the team needs bigs, I mean, so badly, and you had bigs on the board. Somebody sent me a list of 4 bigs yesterday. I mean, I'd put every one of them on the team. Monsters. I mean, literally sent me 4 Camila Cardosos. Like, we're talking like 6'4" and up. Beast. Just in there clogging up the middle to take passes from Caitlin Clark and put it in a bucket. Catch, receive pass, shoot, drop in bucket. Nah. Let's bring in another guard. Another mother bleeping guard.
The roster construction itself makes this argument impossible to ignore. You don't add multiple point guards if your franchise player is clearly and unquestionably your primary floor general. You don't draft Raven Johnson if the long-term vision is fully centered on Caitlin Clark running every possession. And when you zoom out and look at what else was given up in the process, the picture gets even sharper. Indiana brought in a cluster of undersized guards, so many in fact that it created a ripple effect elsewhere on the roster. The one area they actually needed size and balance, it quietly became the casualty. They selected Juiced Josite, a 6'4" wing with legitimate shooting ability, the exact type of stretch forward that would naturally open the floor for both Aliyah Boston and Caitlin Clark. Instead of locking her into a secure long-term role, she was placed on a vulnerable developmental situation, and that matters because in the WNBA, that kind of contract structure leaves you exposed. Any competing team can potentially step in and take her. In other words, a valuable piece was left unprotected while the roster continued to stack up on smaller guards. When you line it all up, the message feels consistent. This isn't a roster being built entirely around a single engine. It's a roster being shaped into something more distributed, where Caitlin Clark is part of the system rather than the sole center of it. Now, to be fair, there's another side to this conversation, and it deserves to be heard. This is where WNBA Pro focuses on facts, not reality. reaction. Aaliyah Boston addressed this dynamic on her podcast and essentially urged people to calm the noise. She pointed out that external narratives often blow things out of proportion compared to what's actually happening inside the locker room. She even referenced her own rookie year. He said explaining that early awkwardness with Clark was normal, but it quickly evolved into a strong on-court and off-court connection. Today, the two are aligned, comfortable, and function as the foundation of the franchise together. Raven Johnson, for her part, has also done nothing to escalate tension. Her comments have been fully professional. She has praised Clark's game, called her elite, highlighted her winning mentality, and emphasized that she's coming in ready to learn and contribute. From a personal standpoint, there is no visible conflict here. No friction, no locker room divide, nothing to suggest internal hostility between the players. And strictly from a basketball perspective, there is also a real case for the selection. Raven Johnson brings defensive recognition at the highest collegiate level. She's been through deep tournament runs, understands winning environments, and offers perimeter defense and ball handling depth. With Indiana dealing with guard injuries and rotation instability last season, adding another reliable backcourt option isn't unreasonable on paper. So yes, the pick can be defended in basketball terms, but here's where the situation becomes more complicated, because a decision can make sense on paper and still fail in execution if the communication around it erodes trust between the organization and its fan base. And that's the core issue fans are reacting to. The Fever didn't just make a selection, they made a selection, then layered messaging around it that amplified confusion instead of clarity. Whether intentional or not, the rollout magnified backlash rather than easing it. From a public perception standpoint, it has created one of the most chaotic communication stretches a professional franchise can have. And the conclusion WNBA Pro is arriving at is not that this is accidental noise or simple mismanagement. It's that this reflects a deeper organizational philosophy at
Sit back and relate to what Caitlin Clark's going through and her game, and how she should be used. Crazy. First step, attack fans. I've seen this so much over the last decade. Entertainment, ESPN, media. Let's attack the patrons. That's not real smart. That's not a great idea. Tell me what you think. I'm not spending a dime. Not a dime on the W, not a dime on the team. It is not going to happen.
Work. We believe Stephanie White genuinely holds the conviction that her defensive system matters more than any single player on the roster. We believe Kelly Krauskopf genuinely sees the long-term identity of this franchise as something that should stand above even Caitlin Clark. And we believe Lynn Dunn genuinely expects fans to stop questioning, fall in line, and simply trust the organization without hesitation. But we also believe all three of those perspectives are fundamentally off base. It's shown because the Indiana Fever without Caitlin Clark is a franchise that went 5-31 in 2022, a team that barely registered nationally, a product that struggled to draw television audiences, struggled to fill arenas, and struggled to move merchandise in any meaningful way. And the Indiana Fever with Caitlin Clark has become something entirely different. They are now one of the most valuable assets in women's professional sports history, a franchise that commands charter travel expectations, massive investment in facilities, and a ripple effect that even impacts veteran contracts and salary structures across the league. That transformation didn't come from a defensive scheme. It didn't come from corporate messaging. It didn't come from system adjustments or branding strategy. It came from one player, one generational talent out of Iowa who fundamentally changed the trajectory of an entire league. And that reality leads to one unavoidable conclusion. Every decision, every roster move, every draft choice, and every offensive philosophy inside this organization should be centered around maximizing that player's impact, nothing less. Training camp begins tomorrow, and in the next 48 hours, all the discussion, all the speculation, and all the narratives will stop being theoretical and start being tested on the court. We are about to find out exactly what the Indiana Fever truly believe in practice. Are they going to put the ball in Caitlin Clark's hands and fully unlock her as the primary engine of the offense? on, or are they going to continue down the path their recent decisions seem to suggest? Reducing her on-ball responsibility, distributing creation across multiple guards like Raven Johnson and Tasha Harris, and betting that a shared system can replace singular dominance? Because if that second approach is real, then what fans are seeing isn't just roster experimentation, it's a fundamental redefinition of how this team intends to operate. And people are already paying attention. Fans are paying attention. Media is paying attention. The financial impact is already being discussed in every corner of the league, and we're not stepping away from this conversation. We're going to keep breaking it down piece by piece as it develops. This is WNBA Pro. If you're locked into this story and want the deeper breakdowns as they happen, make sure you stay tuned. Drop your perspective in the comments, because this one is dividing opinion fast. Is this a calculated organizational shift away from centering Caitlin Clark, or is the reaction getting ahead of the reality inside the locker room? Every angle matters here, and hit the notification bell, because once training camp action starts leaking out, quotes, scrimmage reports, rotations, we're breaking all of it down in real time. The answers are coming soon.